You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to the writingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS, together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Writing Community Chat Show. Very excited to be back as always, and I'm always starting the show with a smile. You might wonder why, and it's because I look at that video of me and Chris and just think, wow, I need to change that very quickly because it's quite terrible. I am waiting for him to join as normal, so he's probably having some sort of technical issues. But in the meantime, I want to know how you were doing. How's your writing been in the past week since our interview last week, and what have you been up to? Yeah, let us know in the chat. I'd be interested to find out. Also, you may have noticed on socials that a Kickstarter has started to try and get me and Chris to Canada to be terrified in many kind of ways, to stay in a haunted house on Wood Island with JD Barker and a paranormal investigator to explore this haunted house, which is the inspiration for his latest novel. And at the moment, we are 17% funded, which is pretty damn good with 36 days to go. So if you can support us, back the project, please do so. And if you can't, that's understandable, but please give it a share around because that might help someone else pick it up and back the project. Also, one of you can come with us, and depending on the sort of funding that we get, if we make the funding, we can go and get the equipment and stuff we need. If we exceed the funding, then we can also pay towards someone coming with us. So just imagine sitting in a house in the pitch black in a haunted house with myself, Chris Hooley, JD Barker, a paranormal investigator, and spending 2 days there doing that. Wouldn't that be fun? So if you can back it, please do. And like I said, share it around if you can do that as well. Let's have a look in the comments. Anya, hello to you. Hey all, hope you've had a good week. Hello, Scott, nice to see you. Hey everyone, thanks for being terrified. Oh, yes, for being terrified. Yes, I can't wait to see if that does happen. If it doesn't, you know, it's worth trying for. But there you go. Is this on Prince Edward Island, Canada, or off the New Hampshire coast? That is a brilliant question. If you look at, hang on a second, let me find it. The, what's it called? Haunted House Wood Island. This house here, let me share it with you on the screen. Sorry, yeah, podcast listeners, that's not very useful for you. That's just a blank page. That's good, isn't it? Okay, so that's a really bad page to show you. It's actually got a good story. It's that place, wherever that is. It just says Wood Island Lighthouse, which does look quite spooky, if I'm being honest with you guys. So I don't know. I haven't got the answer to that. Halo says, I think it's PEI. So Prince Edward Island, I imagine. Yeah, possibly. I'll let you know about that, guys, once I find out. But looking at that, I think it is Prince Edward Island. Yeah, so guys, like I said on the podcast, on the YouTube channel, let us know in the comments if you've been there to that spooky place, if you'd like to see it happen. And actually what you can do is suggest something that we can do while we're there. I know people have mentioned already, like a seance or just investigations, and you know, that's part of the process for the backers. They'll get to see the behind the scenes footage, and we'll release a vlog, of course, but little footage of us going around with cameras in the dark and hopefully getting things picked up on maybe audio sounds as well. It'd be absolutely amazing for us to go there and actually pick up something unexplainable, which could just be as much as Chris Hooley snoring. But there you go. Okay, what am I going to do? Because Chris is still missing in action, which if we do go on that adventure, I hope he doesn't go missing there, because that would be spooky. I'm going to get a guest later on now, and if he does join us, then fantastic. But if he doesn't, I'm sure there's a good reason for that. So tonight we are joined by an author whose debut novel, Wanderlust, as you can see right up in that corner, has left readers questioning reality itself. A master of psychological and romantic thrillers, she weaves stories that blur the lines between fantasy and truth. I've lost that. Oh, no, go. Right. Keeping us hooked from the very first page. Based in Birmingham, England, when she's not writing, she's exploring the world, solo backpacking through cultures, sipping red wine, and dreaming up her next adventures. So please give me a big hand in welcoming to the show, Leila Costevelos. Hello, Leila.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Well, I'm actually really intrigued by this haunted house you're going to, especially after seeing the picture of the lighthouse. That would be really interesting.
It looks very spooky, doesn't it?
It really does, even from the picture. I can imagine.
Yeah, it's got a dark history with some gruesome details there. So it is apparently haunted. So that's part of the inspiration.
Yeah, I don't know why that really excites me.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, Halo says hi, Leila, in the chat. Yes, it does, and I think it would be a terrifying but also very fun experience, and that's why it's even more fun to put that on camera and send me and Chris there, because I think it would be a lot of comical value as well.
Well, 100%. I'd love to watch that.
Yeah. Leila, thank you so much for joining us on the show. How are you doing? How has your past week or so been?
Yeah, it's been really good, thank you. I've got my current novel out for beta reading now, so just trying to be really patient with all the responses, but it's been positive, so, positive experiences.
Yeah, definitely. And again, if people listening back, watching back to this, want to pick up a beta reader book from Leila, would that be possible?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, brilliant.
If you like domestic thrillers, something dark and twisted, yes.
And who doesn't like that?
Normal
brilliant.
People, Chris. Normal people.
So, not in this group. Definitely not.
I think these are my people.
As I mentioned, you're from Birmingham, and interesting fact, we actually managed to meet up when I was on a course up there and had a good chat about the show. So, apart from this connection that happened, is there any other sort of writers' connection that you have in Birmingham?
Not in Birmingham. But when I did publish Wanderlust, I did when X was Twitter, I had a great little fan base all around the world. So I've actually met fellow writers. They've come down to see me in Birmingham. I met someone in LA last year. So yeah, not just in Birmingham, all around the world, which is fantastic. So X, I'm going to call it Twitter because
I think we are Twitter.
Yeah. So on Twitter, it was a great place for networking. So no events, but just a great community, really.
Yeah. I'm interested then. Where's the weirdest place you bumped into someone that you're sort of familiar with in terms of writing or from your books?
I wouldn't say it was a weird one. I don't know if I can say this here. I did have someone from Germany who found me because my Instagram is my private Instagram. He added me on Instagram, said he loved the book, and then each day he was like taking a picture of the book at each page and sending it to me, put love heart at the top of it. So it's a bit of a weird one, not really bumping into him. But yeah, that was a strange thing that happened.
Well, I'm guessing you got the readers hooked in that sense.
Yeah, he likes the book. It's a good review. I mean, that's positive, isn't
it? Yeah, just like a bit of light book stalking. Yeah, could be worse. But that's good. That's good. I mean, it's great to connect with people, especially all around the world, going to different places. And I think that's a really good thing. And networking, we've established on the show, I haven't gone to Harrogate and places like that it's a really big step forward, depending on your goals as a writer, I think. And if you want to connect with the right kind of people who will pick up your book at a festival, co-authors that can maybe share it to their audience in the same sort of genres, I think that's a real powerful thing. And a lot of authors want to sit back and kind of stay in their little recluse. But I definitely recommend getting out there and just go into one or two little book places and just getting yourself out there.
Yeah, you did mention that last time as well. It did sound really cool, to be fair. I think I am just very much in my comfort zone. Like me sitting at my laptop and writing is my happy place. Me out in the world, not so much.
Yeah. Is it very different for you then, going out in the world as an author to going out backpacking and just being yourself?
Yeah, 100%. When I'm backpacking, I always do talk about my book because I find they're very like-minded, artistic people, and I feel like I'm coming across as myself. But in everyday life, it's a bit like being like a bit of a villain. Like you got an alter ego. You have an alter ego. So yeah, when I'm at work, I rarely tell anyone about my writing, but my friends in the writing community, it's all I ever talk about. So it is two versions of myself. And then, yeah, when I'm traveling around the world, because I've always got a book in my hand as well, I love to talk about stories, where people have been. And to be fair, when I've gone backpacking in the past, the majority of my time spent on buses and, in hostels because it was proper gritty backpacking. I was just sitting there with my laptop. It's a cheap little laptop, and I was just going away. And then, people would ask, what are you doing? And then I'd write my book.
Yeah, I love that. I suppose it's kind of a nice thing to be able to do that with other people, because people that you're not too familiar with, because when you've got people around you, like maybe work colleagues or people that it's kind of an awkward feeling to talk about your book. And it feels like maybe, I don't know if it's like showing off, but also you're kind of more nervous about what they might think. When you've got
100%.
random people you don't know, I think that could be an easier process.
100%. No, I completely agree with you. People in work, I think there's probably about 4 or 5 people who have read my book, loved my book, but I never broadcast the fact that I'm an author. I feel like it's really pushy. And then in my job role, I like to stay in my lane and do my job. And so it is a bit different. But then on like I said, on Twitter, I'm constantly talking about it. I've got other writer friends. I did used to go to a little a writing club. I think it was on Tuesdays. It was a while ago. It was at one of the local centres. That was nice as well. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. Going to a writers club, do you feel like that was very beneficial to you as a writer?
We were in really different stages of writing. So I was pretty much finalizing my book, and they were thinking about writing, and they were doing different things. So I think it's always nice to mix with like-minded people and see their directions and, where they want to take things, and then offer advice on publishing, self-publishing, and just get a bit of advice from them as well. So it's beneficial in that sense. I think when you're surrounded by those people, for me anyway, I'm like a sponge. I soak up as much as possible. So it's the same with traveling. I'm looking at things, I'm taking things in, and they're always in my books in tiny little doses.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and taking that information in. And a lot of us might not do that, and some of us definitely will, like yourself, but just that information from advice from other people, from listening and watching the show, to having rejections, and actually not just being overwhelmed by the rejection and frustrated, but actually sitting there and taking the time to ask for feedback, and then adapt that feedback into making yourself a more prolific author. I think that's really good advice, to actually stop, slow down, and sponge it all up, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
cool.
100%.
So what we want to do is go into the first little video clip and then talk about your road to writing. So I want to find out, once we come back from the clip, how you actually got into writing and why that thought was there in the first place. And then we'll go from there. So the road to writing coming right up. You can drink, it's fine.
Did you see me?
You're like, oh,
I was like, oh, can I have my water?
Yeah, go for it. So the road to writing is something I'm always interested in, and it's often something we learn from. We don't even realizing it, because people talk about what they did, and that can relate to other people starting off in their journey as well. So at what point in your life did writing become even a thought for you?
I think as soon as I learned how to write, it was just there since I've been a child. I remember as a very, very young child, my mom brought me a typewriter. It was a little pink typewriter, and I'd just sit there typing. I think I learned in school what an acrostic poem was, and I'd just type and type and type. And I was such a little swot. I would take them into school, hand them into my teachers, and just sit there. But I'd write stories. I'd write everything. I loved it from a really young age. It was always really prevalent. Same with reading. They go hand in hand, don't they? I think creating a different world to escape into is such it's such a powerful thing. It's just an escape, but it's an amazing escape. You get to create these characters and these stories. Oh, I've always loved writing, reading, both. So yeah, throughout life, really, it's always been there.
I love the idea of you having that little typewriter as a child. I think that's could be a very powerful thing to get people into writing, just through the joy of doing it as a game almost as a child. And I also love the idea of you going in, taking those work pieces into your teacher, wanting to sit there and get that praise back. So how is that different now? Is that something that's carried on for you? You mentioned the beta readers as well, getting the
Absolutely
feedback.
not. Yeah,
So,
no.
no,
As an adult, sending the novel out is absolutely terrifying. Regardless of how much praise I will receive, I'm the most self-critical person. So I think I've had about 20 responses, which is great because it's only been out for a short amount of time. And I'd say about 95% have been extremely positive. And then there's the 5%, which isn't really a critique. It's just for improvement. And I'll really not, I've learned from Wanderlust not to beat myself up about it, because you can't please everyone. But when someone will tell me that a character is a little bit irrelevant, I will have to take it into consideration. But it kills me because that you've crafted them from nothing. So yeah, I'm learning to take feedback better, but sitting there and waiting for praise is absolutely not a thing for me. It is a nerve-wracking experience.
It is bizarre to us that we'll get reviews on books. Most people will do this. They'll get good reviews, whether it's 4 stars, 5 stars, even 3 stars is a decent review. And then maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 of those. And then you get one sort of 1 or 2 star review, and you focus so much on that one slightly more negative review than you do the rest of them. And it's a strange thing we do.
I made that mistake with Wanderlust. I remember my very early days before it was published. I'd sent it out to someone on Twitter, and he came back and he had the red pen, and it was everywhere. And it was like things highlighted and things he didn't like. And at that point, I'd already had about 30 positive comments, and I focused so much on that one person. In hindsight, you know what, it is so productive, and it's really necessary to listen to those things. But if it's, if the book's already published and people do love it and they don't like the story, that's okay as well, because there are people who do like it. So yeah, it's a bit of both.
Yeah, I think if someone does like it, 1, 2, 3 people, then there's a good chance that there's a handful, hundreds more that will also like it. But it's getting it into the right people's hands. And I think what's kind of crazy is that we'll focus on those bad reviews potentially, but then you look at any bestseller, New York Times bestseller on the bookshelf of a supermarket, go online and you'll also find 1-star reviews of those as well. So it's definitely not pleasing everybody. It's just not possible.
100%. Yeah, it's not. I mean, when I used to get really good feedback on it, I think this person's having a laugh. Like they've not read the book. They don't know anything. And they will literally send me pages of, I love this character. I love what's happened here. And my favorite thing is when someone is sending me chapter by chapter. Okay. And their thought processes when going through it. Like, I can't believe this has happened, and I'm thinking this right now. And I feel like I'm going on that reading journey with them. But even then at the end, I'll think, well, they don't really feel that way. So I have to really believe in it as well. I think, if I love the novel, then it's not really an issue, and that's how I always have to tell myself.
I agree, but also, how amazing is it that you get that feedback? And I think that's very valuable as an author, because you can use that for your development.
Yeah, 100%. I'm always really grateful to people who beta read, people who always leave reviews on books. Before I started writing, I didn't realize how important it was to leave reviews. If you love a book, I always say just leave a review. Even if the author won't read it, someone will, and it helps. Yeah,
it does, definitely. I think that's fantastic. So going from that amazing position of using your little typewriter and waiting for the praise back from your teachers eagerly, at what stage did that become then a work of fiction that which then turned into Wanderlust?
It was a long journey. It was a long and messy journey. So writing then kind of took a little backseat on my journey, I'd say. I went from a really great, well-behaved teen to a really awful child to a really I was awful. But so I would truant school, but it's really odd because I was truant school and I would go to the library across on the other side of Birmingham. So it was a bit of both. So I'd never want to go into any of my lessons, but then I would catch 2 buses and I'd go to the other side of Birmingham. I remember the librarian Helen would bring me a cup of tea, some biscuits, and I think, well, this is great. And I'd just sit there reading book after book. So I was awful in the sense of I didn't always attend my classes, but I was still reading. I didn't actually think that I would. I think when I was younger, I really wanted to write a book, and then it left me, the thought left me, the words were always there. And then the idea of Wanderlust first came about when I was in, I'd say, my early 20s. And I just had this image of this woman in my head. And it was like this really scary, ghastly woman without eyes. And she had these long fingers. And I just sat there and I thought, well, this would be really cool as a character. And it just went from there. And I rediscovered my love of writing. And I feel like the words were always there. It just took a bit of time to get back to that point.
Isn't that amazing that most people who would see that, and if you put that in a film, it would be a horror film.
I loved it.
That's a cool image. I'm going to use that.
I was like, who is this woman in the woods? Yeah, it was such a vivid image as well. She's standing there in the woods, no eyes, and there's this old furniture, clocks hanging from the branches, and there's this woman there. She's really scared, and I was enthralled by it. I wanted to know where she came from.
Amazing. I love that. That's so good. But I got an image in my mind as soon as you said you were bunking off school, going on the bus for ages, going to the library and spending all day there. The never-ending story popped into my head.
Oh, yeah.
When the kid just hides upstairs in the school and lies there with a book all day, that's kind of the image I got there. And
I haven't watched that in years.
Yeah. It just represented to me that you were going there as a massive escape from all the stresses and whatever at school. And just finding your own warm space with a cup of tea and a friendly face and a space that was full of stories. And that's the kind of impression I got.
No, 100%. I had a really, really turbulent childhood, but books, as sad as it sounds, books were my best friends. You can go anywhere with a story. And this is what I always wanted to do for young children, for adults, because, you can have stresses in everyday life at any age. I've had a really dear friend of mine who's passed away, but I met him on Twitter a few years ago, and he had brought a copy of my book. Absolute stranger. He was in his late 60s. His name was Bill. And this man who's in California, completely different to myself, lived a completely different life, emailed me and just said, hi, I just really wanted to let you know that I've been going through a really awful divorce in my life right now. We've separated after 40 years and Wanderlust has really seen me through this. And it touched my heart so much just to be able to give someone else that escape that I had from childhood. And that was my main aim, really, to do that for someone.
I mean, we all look at, people's backgrounds and personal backgrounds and had stresses and traumas and things like that and mental health issues. And reading can be such a powerful tool for that.
It is 100%. It's an escape. But I think nowadays it's so easy to scroll on social media and, we've got Netflix, everything's at our fingertips. It's not like when I was younger and you'd have to sit around and wait for something to come on TV. It's just there now. So really, it's not like the old days. And, it's so important to use our imaginations. Technology is amazing. There's so many benefits to it, but it does make us very lazy, not just in the way we conduct ourselves in lives, but our thinking as well. And to open up that. And I think that, you can watch a really good series on TV, but it doesn't compare to anything that you'd get from a book because you're creating these characters in your mind and they're sticking with you.
Absolutely. I'm just going to interrupt that there because we're having a good conversation, but we've also found a Chris Hooley. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
I apologize profusely for being ridiculously late, but I'm happy I'm here and I'm looking forward to having a good chat about all things writing.
Oh, we're glad you're back, Chris. Happy to have you here as always. We're having a great conversation, and Halo just said that's a beautiful thing to provide the sanctuary, and I really agree. Writing is a fantastic sanctuary for a lot of people. Hooley, Anya says he's back. Are you good? How's your week been, mate?
Yeah, I shaved my beard off.
I noticed that. Yes.
Yeah. And I wish I hadn't though, because I've had non-stop comments all week, and that's really irritating. But yeah, we're here now.
We are.
A good time chatting about writing.
Yeah.
Yes.
we've had a good chat, me and Layla, and talking about her road to writing, and we're just on the impact of using books as an escape as a reader and as an author. So I know we have a lot of conversations on mental health on this show. We're talking about how that is a sanctuary. So yeah, I'm sure you've got some comments on that, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, myself today, my son was unwell, so I looked after him, obviously. And whilst he was recovering, because like kids do, they go, oh, I don't feel well, and they're sick and they're coughing, and then suddenly they have a burst of energy in the afternoon. So I just took 5 minutes to read. I didn't know there was a Caroline Kempness released a 4 You book. So when I found out about that, I was like, I need to order that immediately. And then it arrived today. So I took a bit of time to myself reading the start of that. So obviously within preparation of it starting again.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that's what you're reading your child.
No. But to be fair, on that mental health side, he has got into a series of books recently, a few series, only little. So he's into like Dogman and what's the other one called? Well, Bunny and Monkey is another one. And they're like little comic books, but they're for children, obviously. But they're like kind of like what graphic novels used to be. So they're about 200 pages in a sort of comic book style layout. But he, again, taking that time for your mental health, he does that a lot. And he's reading that series. And I think, like you say, it's really at any age to sort of dip into a book and escape for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we were saying. I think it's really good, especially from a young age, to have that escape and to just develop your imagination and just keep going with it.
Well, you missed this, but it's one of the best things I've heard. Layla was basically skipping school a lot. And do you know what she was doing? She was getting on 2 buses to go and hide in the library all day and read books.
Brilliant. I'm expecting you to be a bit like Matilda and just make a book float from off your shelf.
When you say that, I watched Matilda yesterday morning and I've got that song in my head now. Do you know when she's making the pancakes?
Yeah.
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 I've listened to that a lot recently.
I was going to sing it then, but I don't know what it is properly. Yeah, so Layla, we've got from a wonderful story so far up to the point where you've started, or you've written Wanderlust and you've had the great feedback. But I'm interested in the process there. So you talked about seeing that amazingly creepy character, which as a horror author, I love what you've described as that creepy long-fingered character. But then is that how you've written as a pantster who uses her imagination?
I think I knew the ending before I knew the beginning.
Okay.
So it took a lot. I mean, the novel itself pretty much starts at the end and she's recounting the story of how she got to that place. So in a way, yes, I didn't know the entire story. The characters kind of took me there, but it was a lot of writing and rewriting. So I'm notorious for thinking it's a great book and then just going right back to the beginning. So I think in a way, with my first draft, I had no idea where it was going, typed it all out, and then went back to the beginning, and then I became very methodical with it. So I had my folders with my chapters. This is what's going to happen. This is where Rain's going. No, Rain couldn't do that. I also made character profiles on each of them. So I wanted to know their entire backstory, even like the sideline characters. I just wanted to know everything about them so I know how they'd react in a situation. But to start with, it was just all over the place.
Yeah. If you could go back to before writing this and give yourself advice, what advice would you give yourself?
Well, the thing is, I tried to do this before with this novel that I'm writing now, and it would be to just get the whole book out, don't edit chapter by chapter, because when you do that, the story is going to change. So if you're there making this, chapter 3, this beautiful fluffy thing, and it's amazing, you've got this great imagery and you've got these great quotes, and 9 times out of 10, you're not going to keep the whole thing, are you? You're going to go back and you're going to, and it's hours and hours of work trying to get this sentence right. So I would say get the story right and then go back and then really craft around that.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I would say that, but I didn't do it with the second book, so I don't take my own advice.
Why didn't you do it out of interest?
I think I get really stuck on the chapters, not in a bad way, in a way where I really fall in love with them. So there's certain chapters where I'm really excited about where it's going. So I want to really make it as good as possible. and like just with scenery, setting, conversations, dialogue. So I get really involved in it, and then I'll realize I've spent about 6 or 7 hours on this chapter, where I should be moving on to the next one. So yeah, I'm trying to take my own advice on that. I've done a lot better than it was with my first book. We did manage to kind of, well, I did manage to spend less time on the first draft.
Yeah. Do you write? Where am I going with this? That's completely gone out my head there. No, I've lost that. Go on.
It's all right. That's me on a daily basis.
Yeah, I suppose I'll build on that. So with your characters then, obviously you talked about building up a profile. To what extent do you go to with that? Is it a case of you taking multiple notes, you're drawing pictures, you're talking to the characters in a daily basis when you're going around doing housework and things like that? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'll do a complete backstory on them. So I'll do like a profile. So, you know, age, where they went to school, what they liked, what they didn't like, but like really in depth, like even religious beliefs, past boyfriends, girlfriends. Like I'll really, really get to know the characters, just so they have that essence in the book. For me, in a story, the most important thing is the characters, because we can have the same storyline over and over again, but it's the characters that make it. A lot of my characters are unlikable characters. They're very dark, twisted. You know, they're not the greatest people. And I've usually got a protagonist. In Wanderlust, Rain, I love her. I think she's fantastic. She was a struggling artist and she found her way into this magical world. And I think she's got, you know, she's a little bit hard done by in her life, in her past, where she's, you know, I think a lot of people can relate to that, where they have that escape. So Wanderlust for her was her escape. But before knowing that, there's so much detail that I'd put into her personal story that wouldn't make it into the book.
Yeah, nice. With that in mind, then, we're going to go on to part 2 of the show, which is What's the Story? So when we come back from this little video, we want to hear more about Rain and Wanderlust. So will you be able to pitch us the story when we come back?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Lovely jubbly. Where is it? What's the story? Coming right up. So, Layla, Wanderlust, presented lovely above Chris Hooley's head. Tell us what it's all about.
So, Wanderlust tells a story of Rain, who is arrested on the night she's discovered over her husband's body with a bloody knife. She then tells investigators that she's been venturing into this completely different, this completely parallel universe, this place called Wanderlust, through a mirror in her attic, which is where she paints. Obviously, she's then sent for a psychiatric evaluation to determine her mental state at the time of the incident, and they suspect she's suffering with schizophrenia. So there's a lot of mental health involved in the book. With that, they then delve deeper into her mind to ask about her childhood and ask about the events leading up to the murder. So Rain starts recounting the tale of how she got to that place. So it's, as I said, it's a story within a story. She tells the story of how she ventured into this alternate universe. She sees this woman in the woods, long fingers, as I mentioned, and she keeps having these visions. So it does mirror schizophrenia in a lot of ways, because she will hear voices, she will see things, and obviously no one else can see them. So she's becoming more and more disengaged from reality. And the more disengaged she becomes in this fantastical world of Wanderlust, where there's creatures and these reptilian things and these talking trees, and it's a lot. But yeah.
Yeah, Halo says it sounds fantastic, and it really does. And I love the sort of the way it's been described as sort of the woman in the window mixed with the Chronicles of Narnia. So it's got the darker elements and the fantasy elements. 1 second, I'm losing my stuff today, Chris, everywhere.
I would say, how difficult is that to craft? If you're exploring such a difficult topic like schizophrenia, and obviously people's perceptions of it may differ as well, in terms of maybe they've had people who've experienced it, or maybe they've researched it themselves. How do you use that as a creative tool And what's it like when you're crafting that narrative in terms of like, if there's a certain scene, how do you know if that's the right scene or you're pushing it too far? Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. So I studied psychology at university, and something that I always questioned was the perception of reality. If one person sees something but 100 people don't see it, what's to say that that person's version of reality isn't, it's true to them? And this is where Rain's character comes into it, because for me, psychology, it's so interesting digging into someone's brain, but you can't scientifically prove certain things. People talk about miracles, people talk about these, as you guys were mentioning, this paranormal activity going into, and if you can't capture it on camera, but you guys have seen this ghost, who's to say that didn't happen? And
Absolutely.
this is yeah.
We actually had a conversation when we talked about the guy. I don't know if you've heard the story in psychology where the guy looks at the lamp and everything changes and he wakes up in a coma, but he lived this whole life. So basically he was in a coma and he didn't know it, and he lived a whole life from the moment that he had the accident all the way up until having kids and everything like that. And then one day in his story, it's like quite a famous Reddit friend, and then he looks at a lamp and it's not quite right, and then he realizes, he sort of wakes up from this coma.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but I found that fascinating, like you said, about perceived reality as well.
It is. I think the thing that gets people in the book is we don't actually say that Rain is suffering from schizophrenia. It's alluded to, and the psychiatrist alluding that. It's sort of like if Harry Potter were to tell everyone who did, and people say absolutely not. You're a normal boy, Pinocchio, and they'd say that you're suffering with schizophrenia, and he says, no, I know Hagrid, and there's these big spiders and Dumbledore's there, but no. So it's sort of like that. It's a mix. It's a blurred.
What I was going to say earlier, before again I stumbled with my words tonight for some reason, was, can you describe Wanderlust in 3 words?
Twisted. Twisted. Not twisted. I think it's I'd like to say gripping. And there's a lot of escapism in there as well, because she's escaping reality. She's a struggling artist going into into a different world because she's unhappy with her life, her relationship, things that she's meant to be doing in life, getting married. They're just not aligning. They're not her norms. And she needs that escapism, and she finds that. And there's romance in the novel as well. There's heavy themes of romance. So I'd say that.
Nice. So I've got a review here for Wanderlust, and then I want to ask some questions off the back of it. And that's where I picked up the representation of the woman in the window mixed with Chronicles of Narnia. It says, a thrilling, fantastic read that will keep you saying one more chapter, one more chapter. Wanderlust is a fantasy murder thriller that has this essence of the woman in the window mixed with the Chronicles of Narnia and a dash of Alice in Wonderland, which is an extra added element of awesomeness. The layers and twists will keep you on the edge of your seat. The prose is beautifully written, and I enjoyed this book very much. Have you seen that review before?
I don't think I have. How nice is that?
Amazing. Woman in the Window, the Chronicles of Narnia, and a dash of Alice in Wonderland. That sounds outstanding.
The Woman in the Window is AJ Finn, right? It's the one where is it where she's an alcoholic? I'm thinking I was drinking a lot while I was writing that. So that may be where it crept in, me with my glass of wine while I'm typing.
So the questions I got off the back of that were the quote, one more chapter, is always something authors aspire to do to a reader. Have you purposefully made your book in that way, or is it something that your natural writing does?
It's not natural. I try to leave everything on a cliffhanger, everything. And I've done the same. I mean, it's been easier to write this new book because it's a domestic thriller. It hasn't got the elements of fantasy, which that for me was extremely difficult to craft. So hearing that about Wanderlust, it means a lot, because a fantasy novel, you escaping to a different world, and you've got all this beautiful storytelling, but it's difficult when people, to get that one more chapter feeling. Whereas with a thriller, it's a lot easier to evoke in a reader because it's more so about the story and it's quicker pacing. As a fantasy novel, it's almost double the length, so it can get quite dragged out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, before you started writing this novel, did you consider at all genres in terms of like fantasy is notorious for being really difficult to get into the publishing world and to get to readers, and once you get there it's great, and you can make a whole career off it, but it's notorious for getting that first book to those readers is quite difficult. And obviously you've mentioned there with the second book about writing a more of a straight up thriller. So is that something that's playing with in your mind before you start writing, or is it just you've got a passion for something that you out and you just go with that?
Yeah, so not at all. I think the story was so much in my heart and it just began there. So it wasn't from a marketing perspective at all. I wrote for me, and then I joined Twitter. I got into the community, sent it out to a few people. By the end of the novel, I realized I had no idea about the book market. I went in completely blind and I thought, well, this is an okay book. I'm doing really good here. Then it was like, you need to have X amount of words and we're not looking for fantasy. And it's always no fantasy, don't submit. So I was like, shit, okay, fucked it here. But no, I love the book. And it wasn't anything to do with marketing. I mean, this book has been, because obviously I've dipped my toe in the water. I understand how it is. So if I did want to reach more readers, it would be a case of writing something that was a little bit shorter, little bit easier to follow, which that one more chapter I've heard for my new novel as well, which is great. But it's so it's not really, but now it's more about thinking about getting out there and reaching a bigger audience, which is a little bit difficult because I've had some of my previous readers read this new novel, and I feel a little bit untrue to the genre because they're big fantasy addicts. They love the story. They love the storytelling more than anything. So I do feel like it's good to explore different genres in writing. And then you kind of find what you're good at, and then you have different elements. But with Wanderlust, it's so blended. It's a mix of everything: fantasy, thriller, romance. So it wasn't one straight lane. It was a bit of everything.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. And I think the reason why I brought it up is because I've been toying with the ideas myself of going, do I write a more straight up traditional novel that I think could get into a market? But I listened to a podcast the other day, and the host of that podcast was talking about how there's no, like, for example, a film could be low budget and still win an Oscar. And he was saying in this podcast that books are not treated the same as films or music. Because if you were to write that sort of authentic indie style book that was a bit out there saying a different message, it wouldn't be touched by the publishing industry and it wouldn't be celebrated. It would literally be. Yeah. So then you've got that constant thing of, do I go with art and my imagination and my passion, or do I switch to the business side of things and try and write to make a living, and then maybe throw in a few books that are more artsy and like true to myself? And it's a constant battle I think people have.
It is, and to be honest, it just depends on what you want to achieve as a writer. If you want that fan base, that small loyal fan base, then always stick to what you're doing. Like I said, it's good to try different things. For me, I'll just be completely honest. The second book that I wrote isn't as much in my heart as my first novel. It may be like the thing when you have your first child and, you love it more. My mum said it's not true. I'm the first child, but I believe it. So we'll see. But like I said, I finished the second novel now. It is a very mainstream book. It's a domestic thriller. I think it's great. It's got great reviews. And I've heard really great things about it, that I've been thinking about this for days and days. And, it's stuck in my mind, which is a lovely thing to hear about a domestic thriller. But Wanderlust, the little bits of that always come back to me. When you read a book and you hear a soundtrack and it takes you on a journey and you just have this wholesome feeling, that for me is Wanderlust. And I think that is where my passion lies in writing, creating these universes. Now that I finished this second book, which is completely different to Wanderlust, my brain has gone back to the direction of Wanderlust, not to write a sequel for it, but to write a book in a similar way, where it's fantasy mixed with reality. Again, a woman going on an adventure, going backwards in her life to see different parts in a magic elevator. And I'm excited about that because it's not your everyday. So I think if you want to reach more people, it's a great thing. Is it as rewarding for me personally to hear the positive feedback? Yes. But does it touch that part in your heart? Not as much, which I shouldn't say because it's our writing, isn't it? But it is what it is. I'm going to be honest.
So, Layla, yes or no? Do you, going forward, what does your heart say? Write for your own adventures, your own stories, or write for mainstream? What's your heart tell you?
Adventures, always write with your heart. It's going to be carried across in the message in the book and everything. I think with this domestic thriller that I wrote, it was more of a filler between books. You know how someone will have a big idea, but they need to write to keep their brain healthy and have that brain exercise and keep their imagination going.
Yeah.
I think after Wanderlust, I didn't have a massive novel in me, an epic journey, and I needed to give myself that time, but I didn't want to be stagnant in the process. I had to write something. And I think with this second book that I wrote, the issues in there are they're everyday issues. It's about social media, the concept of that, how we portray ourselves online and what actually goes on behind the scenes. So I think it's a really interesting read. I wouldn't write something that I found wasn't an issue. I always want to tackle something that makes you think, that makes you question, okay, how am I doing this? Or, is this really the way that we should do things in the world? It has to have a powerful message. So although it is a domestic thriller, there is that undertone as well.
Nice. I agree. I think writing for your heart and my own imagination, I think, is something that I still do. Chris, what about yourself? I know you said you're on the fence there.
Yeah, I think obviously I said that I was on the fence, but I have loads of ideas for mainstream novels, but I can't bring myself to write them because I think I know what I'm doing in the process. So mine are still weird. Like the ones I'm writing now are still. I'm going to have to self-publish them or something because I know a publisher's not going to touch them because they're just too out there. But again, I think if I find a few readers, I'm happy with that. And I'm writing for myself, like you said before, Layla, and that's the main thing. My goal is slightly different in that respect.
I'd be interested to know from the audience on the podcast and on YouTube, leave us a comment, please, even if it's on social media. Why do you write, and sort of which direction do you go with? Do you go with your heart and your inspiration and your imagination, or are you more business-like Chris said, and aim for the market? So please let us know what you do. That would be very interesting to find out.
I would like to add, I was at this battle with myself as well, but I did think if there are more people who want to read fantasy novels and want to delve into your mind, this is actually the way to reach them. I don't always think, I guess with domestic thrillers, sometimes you don't always reach the market that you want, but they recommend the book. And I think it's about your writing style as well. That's the same with me. It's never the story. It's about how the writer carries the story. Once I read something from one author, I read everything. I can't stop myself. I'm obsessed. I'm a stalker. So it's awful.
Brilliant. Okay, what we're going to do, part 3 is coming up, so we're going to have to go for it. Otherwise, we're going to push over time. We'd like you to send some questions in for Layla, you subscribers to our Substack, and we will ask those along with our staple questions and see what comes out of that. So here goes Community Questions, part 3. Layla,
hello.
If you could take the ending to anything, TV show, movie, or book, anything fictional, change it, what ending would you change and why?
I'm only going to say this because I was watching it recently with my sister and it was the ending of How I Met Your Mother. How awful is it? How awful is it that you made poor Ted go through so many seasons of heartbreak, misery, on this epic battle of finding someone who is 100% the one, only to kill her off?
Well, the spoilers there if you've not seen it.
I mean, it's like 15 years old. They should.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's pretty tough ending.
That's a good one. But obviously, I suppose the beauty is as well, it's like How I Met Your Mother and sharing a memory and things like that. Maybe I don't know if that changes the narrative of the show, but yeah, I kind of agree with you there.
Yeah, I loved the whole story. I mean, I refused to watch the last 2 episodes. I think the purpose of the show was to say, okay, we go on this long journey and we change. And I think it was more about the friendships on the show and how they evolve and how you're allowed to say goodbye to love that doesn't really fulfill you anymore. But then he got back with Robin in the end, and it defeats the purpose, doesn't it? And also, it's sort of like the ending of Titanic when someone is telling, she's telling her grandchildren about how she loved someone else. So their entire existence is pointless because, your brain's been focused elsewhere for so long.
Yeah.
I
Nice.
thought about the Titanic. Right? That's a brutal way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think I'm just very cynical. But that's how I view the Titanic. I don't see it as a romantic story.
Yeah. No, I don't either. So
I'm really sorry for destroying that. Santa Claus is also
it's
not
all right.
Again, whose reality?
I may need a moment.
Yeah.
But some questions in the chat, so I'm looking forward to hearing your responses to some of those. So I'm going to kick off with the next staple question that we have, and then we'll hear some of those. So if you could take any character from fiction and make that character your own, which character would you choose and why?
So I've been reading a lot of Stephen King recently. So I'd say a lot of his characters, they go on these adventures. I can't remember the name of one of his characters. It was from, was it Charlie from Fairy Tale? Have you read that? It was brilliant. And he rescued a dog. And how amazing is that? What's his name? Is it Charlie?
I can't remember. Yes, it is Charlie.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, he's a great character. I mean, not that I want to go on an adventure with a 17-year-old boy, but, those kind of characteristics where they're heroic, they're up for an adventure, and it opens up a completely different world. You've read Fairy Tale. I mean, it's a very dark, twisted universe, but it's an adventure as well. And, it's difficult, but it's very fulfilling. And then he's I don't want to give any spoilers away. Like how
I do want to go on reading recent Stephen King, because to me it feels like he writes a novel before he writes the novel. So the whole first part of Fairy Tale, and bear in mind this is a big book, and you can see a bookmark there, and that's not where I finished. That's where the first novel, in my opinion, finishes. And this isn't a spoiler, but he starts to go down. But he starts to go down into this different world, but you can see the size of it. He's got a whole book before it just to get into that.
I really love that. I really loved. I mean, with Stephen King, he's all about the characters, isn't he? I think they're so long. I do think, as someone who is really pedantic and really careful about how many words I put into a novel, some can be cut, but Stephen King has that luxury. We're going to read it, aren't we? But certain, he does a lot of character development. Some of his books, not so great. I think you can see some of my Stephen Kings. I've got a whole shelf, and then in my bedroom as well, I've got loads of Stephen Kings. I've read quite a few. I haven't read them all. I like his earlier works. But yeah, I think he's an amazing writer. I love horror. But yeah, I think this fantasy, like the fantasy elements in there, they're magical. So I think he's great at doing that. But the character development, I mean, for that one, he wrote about his mom, didn't he? And, how there is a story within a story. But I do like that.
And he kind of did something similar to yourself in terms of kind of going from fantasy to, he's gone to more of a crime thriller element recently.
Yeah. That exactly.
What are the difficulties between doing that you found personally?
The difficulties between switching genre in the book. I think it's about putting the undercurrent there early on, and then making it not like you have to drop little Easter eggs. It can't just be a case of that's it, we're in this alternate universe. There has to be a build up to it. So even in the very early chapters, there'll be something glistening in the background, someone knocking on the window and no one's there. So it's having that tension build up and knowing that there's an ominous presence. Because, you know, it could be a case of sometimes someone will say, okay, I opened a door and I was in this magical universe. And that's not what Stephen King does. He does drop the Easter eggs. He does really bring you into the character's point of view, engage you in that character's mindset, so you feel like you're on a journey with them. So whatever they're experiencing, the reader is then experiencing. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice.
And would you consider a differentiation between a young audience and an adult audience? And would horror look different for the two, or do you think it's somewhat the same?
I mean, I read horror as a child and I loved it. It's probably why my personality is really messed up. I mean, I absolutely adored it. It's the same with horror TV shows and movies, and I love all the old slasher flicks. I guess when you're writing, you have to write simple, don't you? Because you're writing all these, if you use prose that are too overcomplicated, even an adult will get bored of that. We want to be taken on an adventure. It needs to be simple. It needs to be striking. You have to get the balance right as well. When you're writing, you need to have that rhythm going. So I think if a child can read it, not necessarily a very young child, but someone in their teens can read it, then an adult will enjoy it. I do sometimes read children's books and enjoy them. I think, was it When a Monster Called? You know, them simplistic books, they can speak to adults as well. So I think target audience, for me anyway, I would hope that a child could pick up my book, or a teenager, and they can dissolve into the world as similar to what an adult would. Obviously, we have different takes on the stories based on our life experiences, but I want it to be some way relatable to everyone. Same as Stephen King, when he writes about children, but it's for adults.
Yeah. Right, we're going to have to move on and get these questions squeezed in, because we've got some from the guys in the chat. So Halo says, chaotic question. Would you rather have fangs, claws, or a tail?
Oh, well, claws, because with a tail, I can't really do anything. You'll just tell when I'm happy because it'll be wagging all the time. I'm scared. With claws, if I'm ever in a dangerous situation, I can dig myself out like an angry mole.
Well,
and
I think it already
fangs. I was about to say, with fangs, I feel like I've already got my fangs.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not happy with those. So I trade my fangs for claws any day.
You're not happy with them? Why?
No, my claws, no, mine. I feel like I've got claws. Sorry, fangs.
Yeah, but what's wrong with fangs? Good question. Chris, what would you have?
I've got to go with fangs, with the vampire element.
Nice.
I'd love to be a vampire, like living forever. You know, they're always thin and beautiful, aren't they, and stuff, so that'd be great as well.
Not if they're exposed to light, unless you're Edward, but most of the time, if you actually, have you seen the new
Nosferatu?
Yeah, I do not think he was very young and beautiful.
No, he wasn't. That was terrifying, in the best way. Yeah.
Another from Halo, we'll put that in there as well. What were the most formative books from your library days? I'm assuming she means when you were bunking off school.
I read the classics. I really loved 1984. I really loved Clockwork Orange. I read the crap ones as well, but I really like the classics. I shouldn't say that, but really like, I think one that I loved it was a little bit later than the library days when I was a child. It was probably in my teenage years. I loved Gatsby. I read Gatsby over and over again. I loved the language in it. It was just, it was beautiful.
Nice.
What was it about those books in particular? Like A Clockwork Orange, I can imagine reading that. I read it as an adult, not as a teenager, but as a teenager, I can imagine it being a bit like, whoa, being hit in the face with a pan.
Yeah, it was really cool. I think it's the same with 1984. It was just being in that totalitarian society and just thinking, wow, maybe I could relate to it in some way with my life. But no, it was really cool. And it was just this panic and this onslaught of events that were happening. And I was just so gripped by it.
Nice.
Yeah, fascinating that, because those are the types of books that stay with people. And I don't think a publishing house would touch those types of books at this moment in time.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. And those are the best ones.
Nice. There's a few more questions. There was one in there from Anya, which I quite liked.
Sorry, there's just some creepy cats outside my window, and I think some rituals going on out there or something.
They can probably hear my cat in here outside the door.
I think it's out here because we got.
I think they're communicating. Honestly, my cat is in heat now. I think that's what's happening.
Nice.
Spooky cat. And speaking of supernatural, Anya says, what supernatural entities, if any, do you believe possibly exist?
All of them.
All of them.
Ghosts, aliens. I can't say they don't exist if, you know, they haven't been disproven to exist. I believe in all of them. I love that stuff. I would love to meet a ghost. I 100% believe they exist. I do think I was haunted as a child for a short period, but that's a whole different thing, and we haven't got time to go into that. But yeah, I believe all of them exist. I maybe not werewolves and vampires, but definitely ghosts.
Well, if we do make that Kickstarter, like I talked about at the start of the show, maybe we could have people send in their ghost stories or their ghost experiences, so we can have a reel of that as well.
Oh, definitely. Mine's terrifying now. But then he did turn into a friendly ghost, a bit Casper-esque. Yeah.
Nice, like a sidekick.
Yeah, a bit of a poltergeist, moving things around the house.
Yeah, maybe he was just tidying up.
Maybe it was just my mum playing a trick on me.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do a whole show on the best bits of guests that have experienced ghosts, because you're not the first one. And we've had multiple authors that have been, especially in their childhood, haunted or had some sort of presence in their life. And yeah, you can't really know.
That's interesting, isn't it? I think there should be a psychological study done on that.
Yeah. Well, there could be a study on us if we go to that Wood Island and stay in a spooky house.
I actually can't wait to see that. I really do.
Yeah. I hope we get there. Anya says, I believe in several myself. Fairies, Loch Ness Monster, Ghosts, Champ.
I don't know who Champ is.
No, I don't know what that is.
Fairies, yes, I believe in fairies. Actually, I was in Iceland last year, and I thought I saw a little, it was like an elf type fairy thing. It was, bearing in mind, it was very late. I'd had 3 hours sleep, and I was walking at 2 o'clock in the morning in the safest place in the world, 45 minutes to get coffee. So you can see how bad my addiction is. And I promise you, I saw this little thing flit across the road. It was a tiny thing, but it was a person. I promise this is true. And he ran across the road, and I felt so safe. I didn't think I'm going to be mugged by this tiny thing. But I just stood there completely gobsmacked. I promise you this happened. And then I got my coffee.
Love it. Anya said it's a Nessie-like monster in Lake Champlain between Vermont and New York. Thank you. Yeah, that's a brilliant story. She believes in elves in Iceland. They often avoid building roads in certain areas because of elves.
I told you, I didn't even know that.
Well, maybe it was crossing a road that they shouldn't have.
I am the elf whisperer.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to research this now.
Amazing.
Brilliant. So before we go, where can people, obviously, if they've listened to the show and they've watched the show, where can they stalk you, and like you stalk some of the authors that you mentioned? And where can they find all those good bits?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, X, El Costevelos. Drop me a message. I'm always very responsive on there. And then you can pick up my book from Amazon if you're interested.
Nice.
Yeah, fantastic. Layla, you've been a fantastic guest. Brilliant conversations. I'm glad to know your next book is in the works and it's on its way. And hopefully we will see that, author journey develop a bit more. And yeah, great to meet you up in Birmingham and great to chat to you tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me both.
Very welcome. Have a great weekend. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you're listening back or watching it back again, let us know. What was the question I asked, Chris? Oh yeah, which side you're on, writing for pleasure or for your imagination or for marketing? Let us know what that is. And if you've got any more questions for Layla, ping them out to her on socials, like she just said. I'm sure she'll answer. Or if you can't remember, send them to our Twitter or whatever, and we'll pass them on. But thank you. Pick up Wanderlust up in the top corner there. We'll leave a link in the description. But thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you all next week once again. So from us, it's goodbye. Thank you, everybody. Bye.